All right. So here you are. I was gonna have like this whole introduction. Now I feel like my groove is all off. I don't even know what.
Let's just be honest with everybody. We've been trying for about 30 minutes to get into a Facebook Live through Zoom, and it's like no dice. We are not good at this.
Nope. We failed miserably. Um, Tried a lot of different things. It didn't work out for us.
We had a concert going on in Stacy's place. Like,
Yeah, multiple me's, which is terrifying. Coming from all angles, we didn't know what was happening. So,
oh God.
all right. Well, Johnny, I'm just gonna have you introduce you because I feel like that's better. What do people need to know about you?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me on here, letting me speak to your community. Sorry, Stacy's community, that it's not live. Hopefully, we can work this out at some point, and I can hop back in for like a live if you guys have questions. But
Yeah.
so right now, I actually am working with men and trying to help them build really positive pillars of masculinity instead of subscribing to what society's telling them it means to be a man, because a lot of guys are really struggling with that. And then today, in today's society, that's becoming a huge issue because guys can't figure out where their position is, where they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to act. So I'm trying to help guys navigate that and then just be confident and authentic to themselves and who they want to be and who they want to show up as a man. So that's really mainly what I'm doing. But I also am getting the call and the request to start actually helping women understand men a little better. And so that was kind of what I talked to you about and why I wanted to hop into your community and address some of the things that I heard women are struggling with, and then address some of the things you may think women are struggling with. So
For sure. Like you guys think we're confusing. You are also very confusing. So,
yes.
but you are also like, so retired Army Ranger. Is that how you would say that? Like what?
No. I did not retire. I'm
Oh,
former. So
okay.
yeah, I'm former. So I was in U.S. Special Operations Army Ranger. I did 4 combat tours overseas. Then I worked for 5 years as a tactical commander for the U.S. Ambassador's Detail for a private company. So I basically was living in Baghdad for like 5 years after that. So all in all, I spent about almost 10 years overseas. Yeah.
So if you could like take what man is supposed to be, what we are told a man is supposed to be, you're right in that box.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, yeah, that's like the position my life has taken.
Okay.
So,
Gosh, it's just good to see like we would view you and say like, oh yeah, that is
yeah,
a man of our like what our society looks at. And so it's good that you're going to talk about the other side of that because you've been in the very masculine role.
yeah, no, and yeah, I've been in the alpha community. I carried that around with myself for a long time, and that's where I think a lot of guys end up having some struggles because a lot of that alpha mentality, if it's not consistent with aligning with themselves, a lot of that alpha mentality is just a facade that's masking a lot of the insecurities within the guy. So
That makes sense. And then you have a podcast.
I do. I have the podcast, The Art of Masculinity. And so on there, it's been a lot of fun. I've brought a lot of guys from different walks of life, from, millionaires to dudes who were, still living the life overseas, still doing protection. I've had a lot of special operations guys in there. I've had authors, I've had business owners, and I just try to hammer out like the struggles they've had in their lives, because it gives guys the understanding that if you're struggling, you're not the only one. Like even these guys who we all look at as successful, or even the guys that we look at as like the toughest dudes, like they've all struggled too. And like they're honest about it. And so I love that about the guys who've come on the podcast, that they've been so willing to just open up and give like kind of their heart and emotions out to all the dudes out there to say, hey, like guys, you can really, really, open up and be authentic with yourself. And it doesn't mean that you're any less of a man, and you're going to struggle. It's okay.
Yeah. I love that. Something that I've been hearing from like friends of mine, my community, myself have like been through it, is that guys are placed in like these boxes, and then there's these expectations that they're supposed to do it all, like not have any emotions, not talk about it, take care of the family, like this is what's going on. And as like a woman, we can see when that's like becoming too much, like for the guy in our life, like it's coming out in whether they're like just snippy about things, they're this or that. And like right now might be the perfect time that men are feeling this, because if they've been laid off in some way, or and
Yeah.
like there's like it's like there's things that are threatening their main responsibility in their head, which is to protect their family. Like how do we handle that? Like what do we do?
Yeah,
Hard to watch.
it's a great question. And with today's struggles where guys are kind of being let go, and maybe the woman is bringing in the bacon for the house because she still has a job, or maybe she's a solo entrepreneur and he is not working because, you know, people are furloughed and stuff like that. Like, that's a struggle, and it takes a healthy amount of communication with it, but it takes it in a loving way. So like one way that I've talked to women about how to have that conversation with men is you got to use, and it's not guilting. I don't consider it guilting, but you got to use pain points with men. So when, you know, I think it's sexy when you do this, or it makes me feel like sad when you do that. Like that type of vocabulary, guys don't like to hear that. If you say, "Oh, I'm mad at you," and something like that, all of a sudden he gets really defensive. Or if you get that anger tone, like he gets defensive, he's going to shut down. That's when the emotions get blocked. That's when the conversation stops, and it's not going to be healthy. But with a guy that's already losing like a job, or if he's struggling to figure out what he's doing right now during this kind of like, you know, time where things are unknown, you got to help if the woman is kind of like that breadwinner, or the woman is kind of holding that masculine form up for the family, like she's got to figure out, okay, how do I open this conversation to get him to talk about this in an inviting manner, right? And so that means that, you know, there's a space there of using vocabulary like, you know, hey, it's like really sexy when you are like cooking, right? Like, give him something to do. Like if she's working all the time and she would love to have him like cook, like, oh my God, it's like super sexy when you cook, right? Like, or, oh my God, it is adorable when you do like this, or this. Like giving him things and then giving him that positive feedback, that positive reinforcement gets him to want to get out of his own mind and not be down on himself, you know, or start playing a video game and completely check out, you know, or just
Right.
sitting there watching Netflix on his own while she's working.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. That's a good, I'm going to start using that. Like you look really sexy when you're washing the dishes.
Yeah.
No, that's
Hey,
good.
guys love that. We want to be wanted too.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's so good. And I think that like the follow up to that is even like not in necessarily this, like guys don't seem to have anybody to go to, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So that's like the other thing that I'm hearing is like they need to talk to somebody, yet they don't, it doesn't feel like they have anywhere to go. Do you have any like recommendations, or like I don't know, like
Yeah, and this is all dependent on where the guy is in his journey. So
okay,
let's like, we have to make the disclaimer out there. Some men are a little further along in like a self-realization journey where they're willing to, because asking for help with men is not intuitive, and it's not inherent in us to want to do that because it immediately emasculates most of us. We're taught that we're supposed to know everything by a certain age, and to ask for help or to ask somebody questions means that implies that we don't know something. So automatically you're putting him, depending on where the guy is, you're already putting him in a form of emasculation there. So if that's even a word, actually, I think I may have
I
pulled
like it. I think we will.
that one. But yeah, so when you're talking to him about, or my biggest thing and this goes for women like trying to get men. So say for instance, you're a woman in self-development and maybe your guy is not really all along on that journey yet. This goes for the same purpose of that, is to also help him to start doing some self-realization to where he can find somebody to ask for help, or a community that he can go hang out with, is start doing psychological warfare on him. And I'm, you know, obviously being former military and stuff, and like just being a student of history, psychological warfare has been a tactic that we've used throughout time. And like, if you use that on your husband or boyfriend by putting on a cool podcast in the background that you think he would like, and while you're doing the dishes or while you're sitting there out in the living room journaling or whatever it is, and then he listens to it and he might pick up a couple things, and then all of a sudden he starts listening to it on his own, or making a mention of, oh my gosh, this I was actually listening to this guy's podcast today. This guy, Johnny, he was former Spec Ops, and he was saying that this book was really good and it really started his journey for, and then it gives him a reason to want to look into it. He's like, oh, that's a guy I look up to or a guy I would respect, right? Mm-hmm. Hearing his background. Okay, let me see what this dude's about. Let me see what he's reading, you know? And then all of a sudden he's buying the book. And then all of a sudden he's wanting to be part of the male groups that are out there. So that's like the psychological warfare side of it. I always promote to women. It's a healthy psychological warfare. It's not for insidious reasons.
Sure. No, I love that. It's funny that you say that because I have been on like a personal development journey for like a few years now. And, but Andrew's working from home right now. Right. So it's been so fun for me because I sit up in my office and I listen to him talk to his team, and he's like using things that I taught him. Like, what? Like, I didn't even know you were listening. And he's like, I listen. Like, I listen. And so I think that it is powerful to know that just because they're not saying, hey, that's really cool, or maybe I'll check that out. Like, they're always listening. They're kind of like, always, like kids are, I don't know, but so I like dropping those little things here or there. And I know that I can do that with Andrew. Like, I'll shoot him a podcast that I think that he would really get a lot out of. And I think that maybe, would you agree that it's like you have to just pick and choose, and you can't be like, here, do all these things. Like, yes. It has to be like really placed in there well.
Yeah. No, it's got to be, and it takes time. It's going to take some patience, but it's like, yeah, you want to sprinkle it in there. You want to have a podcast on, or you want to have the door open when you're coaching somebody on, life coaching or something, or you want to, make sure that you let them know, hey, this book was really good. I heard this, Jocko Willink was reading this book and he said it's awesome, or Bedros Keuilian was reading this book and he said it's really awesome. Like, you should check it out. Like, guys that are out there that have like a background or a foundation that other men respect, those are the guys you want to talk about, like them doing this or that. So that's what I feel is like really important for that. Yeah.
No, I like that. Okay. Another question that I had is communication, as you and I know, is like the biggest thing, right? And it's so often what I think is missing in a lot of marriages, relationships, is like the communication just isn't there. How do you start? Like, let's say you want to just start having like those like deeper connections with like your spouse, and you like feel as if maybe, I don't know, like whatever it happens to be, but like you want to start communicating better. Is there a way to like, do you have any advice as how to start those conversations, like subtly, without like them running away, but you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, I think guys I think do well on average with having the direct communication, but you have to do it in a way that you don't put them immediately in a defensive position or posture, right? So I think the first thing is you guys have to speak the same language. So if you've been on a self-development journey for 3 years and he just started, there's going to be a language barrier there on how to communicate. I promise you, unfortunately. So the first thing is you want to try to get him into that world that you're talking about, because if you start talking about, well, I inhabit this positive energy by rewiring my brain and doing this and that, and he's like, whoa, I have no clue what you just said right now, and now I feel like I'm talking to like somebody speaking gibberish to me. So you've got to figure out the communication, which a lot of times that is doing the psychological warfare to get them tied into the world. And then when you have it with men, like I said, we do a lot better with direct communication. So not like being passive aggressive or resentful in your actions and stuff, like just being like, hey, sweetheart, like I'd love to talk to you about something. I was really thinking about this, and I think it'd be cool for us to do this together, right? And then by this together, it's like, oh, hey, we're sitting down and listening to a podcast, or hey, I want to, I think that we're kind of struggling on the communication part. Can I talk to you about how I feel about this? Like asking him that permission so it doesn't sound like you're just coming at him and attacking him. Because as soon as you start saying, well, you suck and you did this and that's why I was mad at you, like that's communication's all out the window at that point. So
so something that I always try to do, and this is something I talk to a lot of my clients and just women about, is like that asking permission thing. Like, don't assume that somebody's ready to hear what you have to say, or like or have constructive criticism, like nothing. For me, it's always I try to really promote that, like hey, like are you open to having a conversation about this or this, like whatever it happens to be. And then like I feel like just asking that brings your guys' guard down a little bit, and you're like, because if you say yes, you're essentially saying like, I'm open to hearing whatever you have to say right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And it's like, you want to make sure it's not at the tail end of like a heated argument. Like you don't want to have like those communication pieces that you think are pivotal to helping you guys be a better couple. You don't want to tack them on at the end of an argument when it's fresh in your mind of what you're mad at them for and what you want to talk to them about. So I've had to learn this the hard way with my wife, is that like I would do that and she'd be like, I don't need you to talk about, I don't want to talk about that right now. I'm not in the space. And I'm like, oh, okay, but you want to communicate. So then I had to figure out, okay, let me jog this down in my memory on what it is I want to talk about. And when we're having an evening where we're just cooking dinner and sitting on the couch, that's a good time because there's, loving energy around, like nobody's in an anger posture. You're not sitting there with resentment. You're just like chilling. You're like, hey, sweetie, I'd love to talk to you about this just because I was hoping you'd be okay with talking about this because I think this can help us to better improve our communication. And when you position it as a team thing, guys do better with that too. So if you focus on like, oh, as a couple or as husband and wife or our relationship, when you start to use that type of vocabulary, you stop making it look like they're the problem. So then you take some responsibility in the communication too at that point.
Gotcha. Yeah, it took me a long time to learn. I actually say I joke that I'm not really sure how Andrew and I stayed together for as long as we've been, because like I was like a terror. Like he was actually much better at communication than I was, and he was much better at saying I'm sorry than I was. I was like a total dick. Like I would never take responsibility for anything. Like anything. He would be like, I'm really sorry about like that I did this, and I'm like, good, you should be. It was not my fault. Just like, and since then, I think it's been really fun because we now can like, it's almost like it's like a battle to say who can say I'm sorry first, right? Like I'm like, okay, well, because what I've recognized is that if we're mad at one another and I can go and find like there is always something that you could have done differently in one of those situations. And so I was saying like, I'm really sorry, I could have handled this a little bit different. It seems as if it kind of brings your guys' guard down a little bit, and then you're more willing to apologize, and then the conversation can kind of go the way we want it to, instead of saying like, well, you screwed up.
Yeah. It goes a long way when like I had a conversation with Taylor early on in our relationship. I'm like, I understand like we will get mad at each other. I understand we will be in arguments. But the one thing I need from you is that when you realize you did something wrong, at least come back and say, hey, I realize that I messed up here, here, and here. Like, and I have no problem saying I'm sorry, but I need to know that you recognize when you kind of screw stuff up too, because that's what makes us effective communicators. And so like that is important but you alpha women, like you boss ladies, you guys struggle with that. It really is, because Taylor did too for a while, and she still does on occasion, like struggles with it. And so you boss ladies have that in you because you guys are in your masculine a lot. So you guys struggle with that, getting back to being like, oh man, I have to admit my flaws too. I have to accept when I messed up. It's not just him, like I did this, or maybe it was even my perception, right? It wasn't even him. I just perceived it wrong. Right? So
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for talking about that a little bit, because I think that can be a pain point for a lot of people. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is just curiosity. How do you feel about the whole notion of don't go to bed angry?
I pretty much make it a policy to not do that. I don't like it. It affects your sleep. It can affect you even getting good recovery sleep. And I'm a huge proponent of good sleep now. But
I
yeah,
love
so
talking about sleep too, but
oh yeah, I am a huge proponent of good sleep. But going to bed angry, it's not good for your sleep in general. So health wise, for both of you, it sucks. And then as you guys wake up, it's not good because you're already sitting in that negative energy that you've just slept in for freaking 8 hours or however long you sleep. You've just slept in that negative energy for 8 hours. And if you don't think that's real, it's real. It's palpable, right? Like you get up in the morning, and you're just pissed at them. You're like, I don't even want to talk to this asshole. Like, walk out, you just walk out and do your own thing that morning. And then it permeates for like half the day. And then it's like, you've literally lost like a whole day almost just for being angry when you could have come to some agreement the night before, some compromise between the two of you guys to say, okay, I accept I was wrong. I accept I was wrong. Here's where we're going to meet in the middle. Like, and then gone to bed and everybody would have felt better.
okay.
So
I like
I
it. I'm
policy
actually, I might change my tune on that, because I'm like, I never really thought about it from that aspect. I've always just been like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Talk about it later. So that's interesting. Now, okay, now I'm just getting curious about things. So I won't keep you for too much longer, but I like, my policy is now like, make the internal external. Like, I think that there is such an issue where so many problems arise is when we don't just talk about the little things, and then the little things like turn into the big things, right? Like, it's never, I always say the thing is never the thing. Like, you don't snap because the towel is on the floor. Like, you snap because you've been like pushing these things down for so long. So from like a guy's perspective, like, would you rather I feel like this is a dumb question when I phrase it this way, but us just like speak up and like, if we're feeling a certain way, like get it out of the way? Or would you rather us sit there with this like resentment towards you and like, because they don't want to like start a problem?
That's like, you never want to be walking on eggshells. And so like, it depends on how you come at it. So my policy that I talked to Taylor about when we first started dating, I said, neither of us, if we're not willing to talk about it, you can't be mad about it. So immediately you relieve yourself of resentment, because resentment is when you're harboring a lot of stuff, right? But if you aren't willing to tell the person that you're angry about it, you don't have the right to harbor that. So that was our policy early on, and we've held pretty strong to that. Like, I do not, like, if I'm mad at her and I'm not willing to tell her about it, that means I need to deal with it internally on my own. I can't hold it against her, and I can't ask her about it down the road. Like, I either address it then or that's it. And I asked that of her too, and she doesn't have an issue with that one. But we're working on the approach for it, because the approach does matter. So if you putting the policy in place is great. And I would say that if you're going to do that, have an open conversation, obviously, before you're in an actual heated argument, and say, hey, look, this is something I'd love to institute in our relationship, because I think it would be a better communication skill for us. Is if you're not willing to talk about the issue you're having with me at that time, you cannot hold it against me, and you have to deal with that feeling yourself, because that means it's not big enough for you to want to address it. So that's the first thing, is you got to lay out the policy. And then the second thing is when you do get angry, you have to realize that you got to take a breath, because your delivery is going to change the trajectory of that conversation. So if you take a second to breathe, or take a second to collect your thoughts before you articulate something, and don't just act out of the egocentric like anger, that's where you can actually have the communication to be like, okay, I'm not walking on eggshells. I can bring this up right now and we can address it, and nobody's going to go too crazy. We might still be angry for a little bit, but no one's going to get out of hand, right? Like, so that would be my recommendation for that. And those are the tips that we've struggled through together and we've had to learn ourselves, and we still work through to this day. But from what I've experienced and what's worked really well, those have been some of the tools that we've done.
I love that. That's funny. We just actually yesterday I had a conversation that started. One thing Andrew and I have been going through a lot lately is your first impression of your first reaction. So this is something I'm not good about. Like, he'll say something and I'll be like, ugh, or like whatever. Like, it's like the worst thing. Like, I'm like, and he's like, yeah, I really want to talk to you now. And I'm like, yeah. So I love that, because it does, like, how you approach it. The same thing happened, but it was the opposite. It was actually his reaction yesterday.
Yeah.
But we were able to have like that conversation of like, hey, you know how we've been talking a lot about like how we react in the very first few moments, like totally changes the trajectory of how this is going to go. Well, this is what I just saw. And like, it didn't make me feel very good. So that's cool. Okay. So we're all in quarantine, right? We're in like close quarters right now. A lot of people are working in like situations they've just never been in. So I know that you guys don't have kids. We don't have kids. So we might not be able to speak to that world, but just like being with your significant other all of the time. What's your best advice?
Honestly, like I'm a huge proponent of communication. And so honestly, like right now, while this like doesn't have like an ending date to it, if you're listening to this in the Facebook group right now, like sit down in a healthy environment before anybody's getting in any issues and stuff like that. Sit down and say, hey, I would love to actually sit down and lay out some parameters for our communication so we can communicate better while we're here in close quarters together, because we're not used to being around each other literally 24/7. And so we need to kind of set some parameters where it's helpful for us to be able to either communicate or coexist in this space while each other's working. And the other thing is making sure that you're taking a little bit of time for yourself. So if that means you got to put on noise canceling headphones and listen to a meditation and journal for an hour or 2 hours in the morning or in the afternoon, like by all means, take that time to yourself. Like you have to. So those, like my wife meditates in the morning, and it's about almost 2 hours between meditating and journaling and everything else. And that's her. I don't bother her during that time. Like I do my best to not talk to her. I do my best to stay away from and just let her do her thing, you know? And that is her alone time. And that's what I think everybody really needs. So figuring out how to do something like that.
So do you have, like, as a guy, because you are obviously, I guess in our relationship, like Andrew's usually gone. So like I have my alone time. He has his alone time. Like, should they be also, like, you guys should probably also be having that time to yourself.
Oh yeah.
Like whatever that boundary looks like.
Yep. Yeah, I actually will. I'll put on noise canceling headphones and do breath work and do like a meditation in the morning. I'll do that for like 45 minutes. I also journal. I read my book. I'll go out on our balcony back here and I'll just read my book for a good hour, hour and a half. And like Taylor will be in the living room. And so we definitely take that time to kind of collect our own thoughts from within ourselves and not always just be in each other's space and energy constantly.
Right. So to have those boundaries, because
Mm-hmm.
then the time that you guys are together, you're enjoying it and not resentful of the fact that you've had zero time to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the other things that working from home, this is something that I learned from Jess Glazer, and she talked about this, is figuring out that threshold for, like, say, for instance, you guys have an office, understanding that when you step out of that office, you are no longer in your business mode. You're no longer in your masculine if you're a woman, and for a man, you're no longer in work mode. Like when you step through that threshold, you should be husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or father or mother. Like you have to have that switch. I think Kayla Kraft even talked about this too, but you have to have that boundary for yourself, that when you step out of that office, you have to flip the switch in your mind of who you're showing up as, or else if you bring that energy, that business energy into the relationship, no one's going to have fun with that.
Right.
That's not cute.
So you should have separate working spaces, and
Yeah.
then they shouldn't be on the dining room table.
I mean, if you're forced to, so let's face it. Like we have a 2-bedroom apartment. My wife has the office space,
Yeah.
and a lot I'll do right here on this is like our little kitchen table, right?
Right.
But like when I'm done, so she'll come out and her threshold is the doorway from the office, and my threshold is making sure that I take the computer and once I close it, like I'm off like business, like
Okay.
that's no longer. So you got to give yourself that tripwire, whatever it is. If you have to use the kitchen table, you have to use the kitchen table. But like, don't use your bed though. Definitely don't use your bed,
Right.
because your subconscious will start to associate your bed with the wrong things, and then that's not good. But
Right. That's not
yeah.
what we want bed associated with.
Nope.
All right. The only other thing that I've heard a lot lately, and I don't even know on a guy's perspective because I feel like this is more of an issue with like just us and like how we're wired, but is this whole it's kind of a boundaries thing. So we're nurturing at our core. And so like I have found I'm actually not that nurturing. Never have been. But since Andrew's been home, it's like I have been almost in this weird place of like I'm doing all of these things to like make sure that he's okay. But then like totally neglecting if it is if it's a hassle in my own life. Like I will totally throw my needs aside to make sure that like he's okay.
Yep.
Or like I've heard, and I've done this too, is like my schedule doesn't matter as long as like we're doing exactly what he wants at that time. Like
Yeah.
I don't think that you guys like expect that necessarily, but I don't know. Have you ever like have you guys experienced
Actually,
that?
Taylor and I are like flipped. So her schedule is more priority than mine. And so I feel like I'm actually in your shoes a lot of the times where I'm trying to accommodate around her life because I want her to be okay. And I want her to be happy and not have to do much, right? Even though I have all the stuff that I have to do on the day-to-day basis. So I think the first thing is just honestly, it's recognizing that like you both need to be respectful of each other's time. And we've had that, like I literally have sat down and had that conversation with Taylor before. So being very honestly, like we've had that. We've got to be open about it. Like, hey, like, yeah, I can do these things, but I also need you to do some of these things too. And I think that we just both need to respect that we're busy people, but we have to sometimes help each other out when one of us is having a longer day or more things going on, stuff like that. So having that open conversation about it. And the other thing is you know this, Stacy, but it is if you're not taking care of yourself and giving yourself 100%, you can't ever give anybody else 100%. So are you really actually helping your husband if you're not giving yourself 100%?
Right. No, that's so true. That's so true. And we've had those conversations quite a bit lately too, of like trying. And so I think it all just comes down to those boundaries, like you said, like being really clear about that and keep coming back to it when you need to. So
and getting out some of the things that you do like and that you don't like, and making a healthy list that you guys can connect over and be like, okay, it's great to know. You know what, if someone told me that they would come in and give me the answers to the test in school right before I took the test, would I not take them? No, I'd take the damn answers, right? So if you're sitting down and communicating with your husband, or you're communicating with your wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, like you're getting the answers to the test. You should love that. Like write down the answers to the test and then say, oh, great, I don't have to try to figure this out now. I know she doesn't like this. Cool. I can work on the things she does like. Like, that's great. Like, it's literally just giving the answers to the test to each other and saying, hey, this is how we create a freaking beast ass couple, is by, looking at the answers to the test and saying, okay, this is great. Let's mesh these up and like, let's ace this thing. So
I love that. I think that's like the perfect place to stop. I think that's really solid advice. Like, and we so often want you guys to read our minds. And I've been a lot better about this, but it's like, I don't expect that anymore. I'm like, he can't read your mind. So if you want him to know something, you have to tell him
Yep.
in words that's what you want him to do. Like
hieroglyphics, maybe.
And don't try to beat around the bush or put it in between like, hey, it'd be really nice if,
Yeah.
no, like if that's what you want, like be very clear and concise. So from a guy's perspective, it sounds like that's much easier for you guys if we're just like, these are the answers.
Yeah, here's the answers to the test, guys. Like, let's join. And again, it's all about presentation. You can't always make it like they're bad, but yeah, here's the answers to the test. We don't have to play this game where we try to figure this out and try to interpret what one another wants. Like, let's just talk about it.
I love it. Cool. All right. Well, awesome. I can't thank you enough. But again, so people can find you. Your website is launched, right?
Yeah. So, JohnnyElsasser.com. Yep.
Oh, and which I'll make sure I link up to this video, your podcast, and everyone should be listening to it, but definitely the guys in our life should check that out.
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yep. Johnny.Elsasser. And then, you mentioned about a group for guys. I have a masculinity corner on Facebook that they can go request to be part of. And it's got about 50 members right now. And we throw events in there. We do like cool stuff, just talking about it. I try to go live in there as regular as possible. At a minimum, I'm doing it a couple times a week. So, yeah. So,
ladies, I'm going to have him say all of that again, and you turn it up really, really loud. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. So toss him put like a note, like a Post-it on the kitchen counter, like masculinity corner, and they're going to check that out because they're going to know why you wrote that.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time and spending the last 40 minutes. Again, I apologize we couldn't go live, but I know that my community will get a lot out of this because I did. I'll definitely think I'm never going to go to bed angry again. I can't believe the woo-woo person in me never once thought about it from you're sitting in negative energy. Ugh. Okay. Yep. You're convinced me of that one.
Thanks for having me on, Stacey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We'll bring you back too. Hopefully.
Yeah, anytime.
Over. So, all right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, girl.
Bye.
Bye.